Every Gilded Age mansion once flaunted a glittering glass conservatory, a private tropical kingdom in the dead of winter, fueled by fortunes, industrial innovation, and a relentless hunger for status. But by the mid-20th century, nearly all of these million-dollar marvels had vanished, leaving barely a trace. What made America's richest families spend more to heat exotic banana trees than to run their own homes? And why did this breathtaking spectacle disappear almost overnight? To find out, we have to go back to the moment when royalty's obsession and revolutionary technology collided, rewriting the meaning of luxury itself. In the grand courts of 17th century Europe, glass houses began as royal indulgences. Kings and queens demanded orangeries, vast, sunlit halls of glass and stone, where citrus trees could flourish even as snow blanketed the palace grounds. These early conservatories were less about fruit and more about spectacle. To own a winter garden was to announce to the world that you could command the seasons themselves. By the 1800s, the race for horticultural prestige had reached a fever pitch. Across the English Channel, the Palm House at Kew Gardens opened in 1848, its arched glass ribs sheltering a jungle of tropical plants. The structure itself was a marvel, over 400 feet long, soaring to a height that could swallow a full-grown palm. Kew's Palm House did not just protect rare specimens. It became a pilgrimage site for aristocrats, scientists, and the social elite, each eager to marvel at the impossible made real. But nothing captured the imagination quite like the Crystal Palace. In 1851, London hosted the Great Exhibition inside Joseph Paxton's Glass and Iron Cathedral, a building so vast it held 100,000 visitors at once. The Crystal Palace was more than an engineering triumph. It was a symbol of imperial confidence, a transparent fortress that seemed to defy nature and time. For European nobility, the message was clear. To possess a glass palace was to stand at the pinnacle of modern civilization. As the decades passed, these glass marvels became the ultimate form of social competition. French emperors, Russian czars, and English dukes vied to outdo one another, importing exotic palms from the Congo and orchids from Java. The right conservatory could make or break a reputation. Invitations to winter garden parties at Chatsworth or Schönbrunn were coveted, not for the company, but for the chance to stroll beneath banana leaves in the heart of January. American millionaires, crossing the Atlantic in the 1880s and the 1890s, saw these wonders firsthand. They returned home determined to match or surpass the grandeur of Europe's glass palaces. For the Gilded Age elite, a conservatory was not just an architectural feature, it was an instant passport to aristocratic legitimacy. The bigger the palm, the rarer the orchid, the more dazzling the glass, the higher the status. In the world of industrial fortunes and new money, nothing said. A rival quite like a private tropical paradise blooming behind a wall of crystal in the dead of winter. Glass, once the domain of small windows and fragile panes, underwent a quiet revolution in the mid-19th century. Before the 1850s, even the wealthiest builders struggled with crown glass, round, wavy sheets blown by hand, rarely wider than a foot, and always expensive. The arrival of plate glass changed everything. Factories in Britain, and soon Pittsburgh, began pouring molten glass onto flat tables, rolling and polishing it into sheets several feet across. Suddenly, walls of glass could rise without interruption, letting light flood in and transforming the idea of what a building could be. But glass alone was not enough. Wood, the traditional framing material, warped and rotted under the constant humidity of a greenhouse. Foundries answered with cast iron, molded in factories, shipped in pieces, and bolted together on site. These iron ribs could span 50 feet or more, supporting roofs that arched high enough to shelter a jungle of palms. At Kew Gardens, the Palm House's iron skeleton became a model for the world, its curved glass vaults gleaming in the English sun. Across the Atlantic, American engineers studied these blueprints, eager to push the limits even further. The final piece was heat. In an era before electricity, keeping a glass palace warm in January required industrial muscle. Coal-fired steam boilers, some as large as a locomotive, sat in hidden basements or outbuildings. Steam pipes snaked beneath walkways and benches, radiating warmth to every corner. With careful engineering, temperatures inside could hover at a balmy 75 degrees, even as snow piled against the glass outside. The same technology that powered the factories of the Industrial Revolution now kept banana trees alive in Maine and orchids blooming in Pittsburgh. By the 1870s, these breakthroughs had converged. Plate glass made walls transparent and seamless. Cast iron and later steel frames held up spans that would have collapsed under their own weight if built from wood. Steam heat turned the coldest winter into perpetual summer. For the first time in history, it was possible to build a room of glass the size of a cathedral and keep it as warm as a tropical island. Engineers, glassmakers, and foundry workers became the unseen architects of America's new status symbol. Their inventions did not just make conservatories possible, they made them irresistible. George Vanderbilt wanted more than just another grand house in the mountains of North Carolina. When he commissioned Builtmore in 1895, he insisted on a glass conservatory that would rival anything he had seen in Europe, a structure 70 feet wide, filled with light, even in the dead of winter. The conservatory did not just hug the side of the mansion, it was a destination in its own right, a glass palace built to shelter a living collection of the world's rarest plants. Blueprints from the estate reveal a design as ambitious as any cathedral. The arched glass roof soared high enough to accommodate full-grown banana trees and towering palms. Below, an entire ecosystem thrived, curated by a team of 12 full-time gardeners. Their days began before sunrise, tending to orchids from Southeast Asia, ferns from Australia, and coffee plants plucked from the highlands of Africa. This was not a quiet corner greenhouse tucked away from view. It was a showpiece, visible from the main drive, its glass walls gleaming in the sun, or glowing at night from the warmth within. Keeping this miniature jungle alive required more than horticultural skill. A separate boiler as large as those found in small factories worked around the clock to maintain tropical heat, even when snow blanketed the Blue Ridge outside. The staff kept meticulous ledgers tracking every shipment of coal, every rare plant that arrived by train, and every hour spent scrubbing condensation from the endless glass panes. For visitors, the effect was immediate. Stepping through the conservatory doors meant leaving North Carolina behind for a world of green and gold. The Vanderbilts did not stop with Builtmore. The breakers in Newport, Rhode Island, boasted its own ocean-facing glass room, filled with palms shipped up from Florida and ferns from South America. Alva Vanderbilt's marble house once featured a conservatory so elaborate it became the talk of society, only to be demolished in the 1920s as fortunes shifted. Across their estates, the family commissioned at least 3 of these glass palaces, each a monument to ambition, each demanding a small army to operate. The sheer scale and spectacle made the abstract idea of prestige tangible, turning the Vanderbilt name into a byword for American excess. Stepping inside a Gilded Age conservatory was like entering another world. The air shimmered with humidity, thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming orchids. Along the tiled pathways, palm trees soared 40 feet overhead, their fronds brushing the glass roof, each palm shipped at great expense from the tropics, each one a living monument to the owner's reach. Beneath them, banana trees unfurled broad leaves, coffee plants flowered beside rubber trees, and rare ferns spilled from stone urns. The plant hunters who supplied these collections risked their lives in distant jungles, braving disease, bandits, and the sheer odds of survival. Their prizes arrived in wooden crates, roots wrapped in moss, sometimes after months at sea. The centerpiece of many collections was the orchid, delicate, temperamental, and wildly expensive. Some specimens cost over $1,000 apiece, a sum that would buy a house in 1895. Collectors boasted of owning varieties seen nowhere else in America, their petals streaked with colors pulled from the farthest corners of the world. The most coveted orchids came from New Guinea or the Amazon, smuggled out by plant hunters like Wilhelm Michelitz, whose name became legend among horticulturists. The mortality rate for these plants was brutal. 9 out of 10 would die before reaching their new home, so surviving blooms became trophies worth more than gold. Conservatories were not content with a few showy flowers. Inventories from estates like Builtmore listed over 500 species under glass, from towering palms to tiny carnivorous plants. Water features wound through the greenery, marble fountains, koi ponds, and artificial streams, each designed to evoke a different corner of the globe. Guests wandered through this living museum, pausing to admire a banana tree heavy with fruit, or to watch koi glide beneath the lily pads. For a few hours, winter vanished. Snow might pile against the glass outside, but inside, the world was green, lush, and impossibly alive. The sheer abundance was overwhelming, a spectacle that made the abstract idea of wealth feel tangible, rooted in soil and leaf and bloom. Inside those glittering glass palaces, the real marvel was not the orchids or the palms. It was the relentless machine humming just out of sight, keeping a conservatory at a lush tropical 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit through a New England winter took more than a little coal. At estates like Builtmore, the dedicated boiler for the conservatory alone devoured over 50 tons of coal every winter. That is enough fuel to heat 10 regular houses for the same season. The bills reflected it, $10,000 or more just to keep the glass box warm, a sum that would cover an entire mansion's operating costs, or buy a comfortable home outright. Adjusted for inflation, that is upwards of $300,000 a year, all for the privilege of seeing banana trees in February. The numbers only get more staggering when you look at the rest of the upkeep. Glass is a terrible insulator. Heat bled away through every pane, so the boilers ran day and night. In the coldest months, gardeners worked overnight shifts, stoking the furnaces, shoveling coal, and checking for frozen pipes. Miss a night, and a single cold snap could kill a collection worth more than a city block. Then came the maintenance. Iron frames, constantly exposed to humidity, rusted fast. Every spring, workers climbed scaffolds to scrape, prime, and repaint acres of metal. Glass panels cracked from the stress of temperature swings and flying debris, each one custom cut and costly to replace. Exotic plants demanded daily care, watering, pruning, pest control, and fertilizer, overseen by teams of expert horticulturists. At Builtmore, 12 full-time gardeners were assigned just to the conservatory. Other estates hired European specialists to keep rare orchids alive, sometimes flying them in for consultations. Annual maintenance ran between $15,000 and $25,000, a staggering $500,000 or more in today's money. In many cases, the cost to keep the conservatory alive exceeded the budget for the rest of the mansion combined. Pests thrived in the constant warmth. Whiteflies, aphids, and scale insects turned every inch into a battleground. Some families brought in outside experts just to wage war on bugs. The result was a cycle of endless labor and expense, all to keep a slice of the tropics alive in the dead of winter. For the staff, it was a grind of night shifts, coal dust, and endless repairs. For the owners, it was the price of having a private jungle, one that could bankrupt even the richest families if they let their guard down for a single season. In 1917, the War Industries Board issued new coal rationing directives across the United States. Suddenly, the endless supply of fuel that had kept mansion conservatories warm through winter was no longer guaranteed. Heating a glass palace to tropical temperatures just for the sake of rare orchids and banana trees began to look like an extravagance the country could no longer afford. Newspapers called out wasteful displays, and estate owners faced mounting pressure to shut down their winter gardens. For the first time, keeping palms alive in February was seen as unpatriotic. Labor shortages hit just as hard. Gardeners who once tended tropical jungles under glass traded their pruning shears for military uniforms. The teams that kept these botanical marvels alive shrank overnight, leaving delicate plants untended. Without constant care, rare orchids withered, and exotic palms browned, their value evaporating with each passing week. By the time the war ended in 1918, many conservatories stood silent. Coal bins sat empty, glass roofs frosted over, and the echo of footsteps on tiled paths faded into memory. The first cracks had appeared in the glass palaces of the Gilded Age, and for most, there would be no return to glory. By the early 1930s, the glass palaces that once dazzled America's elite were vanishing at a staggering pace. The Great Depression delivered the final blow. Fortunes evaporated, and even the wealthiest families balked at the cost of keeping tropical jungles alive through bitter winters. Staff were dismissed, boilers went cold, and prized orchids withered in their pots. Across the country, demolition crews hauled away iron and glass by the ton. By the 1950s, nearly every one of the more than 200 Gilded Age mansion conservatories had been reduced to rubble or left to rot, their foundations swallowed by weeds. Yet, a handful escaped this fate, but only by trading private luxury for public stewardship. Longwood Gardens, built by Pierre Dupont, spans 4.5 acres under glass and now survives on a foundation endowment topping $5 million a year. Phipps Conservatory in Pittsburgh, opened to the public in 1893, has thrived as a city park. The Enid Haupt Conservatory at the New York Botanical Garden, Como's Park Conservatory in St. Paul, and a few others endure, fewer than 10 in all. Their survival depends on public funds, grants, and armies of volunteers. Where once these structures stood as private monuments to excess, today they are rare museums of a vanished age, kept alive by the collective will rather than the fortunes of a single family. Today, fewer than 10 Gilded Age conservatories survive, each requiring millions of dollars annually just to exist. As energy prices and climate concerns reshape how we build, their disappearance is a cautionary tale. Even the grandest visions crumble when they are unsustainable. The real legacy is not in glass or iron, but in the reminder that extravagance without foresight rarely outlasts a single generation. What would future generations say about our monuments to excess?